Hello, good morning, or good afternoon, whenever y'all are looking at this. My apologies that this is an online recording. It's been a day. I am in a small island off the coast of Spain, and Zoom apparently doesn't work here correctly. I had to go get OBS downloaded on my phone, bring it to my computer. It's been a day. Anyways, thank you for, joining this recording. I hope it's helpful to you, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about how to pick a journal outlet because this is one of the more important things that you really need to know and are expected to know coming out of grad school, but no one ever teaches you. So let's think a little bit about it. If you don't remember me, my name is Alicia Plemons. I'm in room 6306. I'm an assistant professor of general business. Even though I'm an economist, I'm also the director for the Center for Free Enterprise and the director for the NE Regulatory Research Center as Ed Timmons is leaving. All right, well, let's go ahead and think a little bit about how to pick a journal outlet. So, first and foremost, the piece of advice that I want to give is that knowing how to play the publishing game is one of the most important skills for tenure and promotion. I've seen some of the smartest people I know who have put their papers in just terrible journals or journals that didn't count, and they ended up being skipped for tenure, or they weren't poached from their university, or they ended up having to switch to a non tenure track line. Well, I've seen people who had fairly subpar research but placed them extremely well go on to do really interesting things and keep long-term contracts. So knowing how to play this publishing game, knowing what's the difference between an A star and an A or a B and a C and what that matters for your school is really important for knowing what your career can do. So why do we care about journals? First off, we have hundreds of years of history of this, right? So it's long and established as a way that we've communicated scientific findings, ideas, theories, so on and so forth. And it's something very easy to understand across departments, which is why universities tend to use this system. Now, we're in a business school, which means that we don't respect books. But if you were in an economics department in a social science school, we may also have books in addition to the journals that we're going to be talking about today, but I'm just going to focus on the journal parts. So, one thing to really remember is that your CV is always on the market. Whether you are actively on the market or not, some people are looking at your CV and they're judging what your current and potential impact could be. Now, this is really important because if someone understood the nuances and the comparisons of all the journals in your specialization, if they knew exactly the experimental journals or exactly the health journals, and they really understood deeply what that meant, they wouldn't be hiring you. They'd already have someone who can do it. So it's really important to remember that deans, college level promotion committees, hiring committees, all of these, they're very good at counting. And they're very good at counting the number of publications that you have and then taking those journals and comparing them to a list to figure out how many A stars you have, how many A's you have, how many B's you have, how many unacceptables you have. And this is something that's become much more important, not only for grad students, but for junior faculty members. So I went on the market about 5, 6 years ago for my first job where I went to Southern Illinois University, Woodsville. And back then, the average applicant on the economics job market had like zero point 0.7 pubs. Most people went on the job market without a single publication. This was actually a really important piece for West Virginia University because many of the really great placements are because there was a push for students to publish here that wasn't at similar ranked schools. But today, the number's much higher. So, for example, I'm hiring 2 postdocs. I have hundreds and hundreds of applications where most of the applicants now have between 1 and 5 publications. Some of them are really great in quality, and some of them are terrible. And it just shows me that they are not going to be a high impact researcher. They're going to junk journals, and I put those to the side. So, a bad publication on your CV can sometimes send a worse signal than no publication at all. Another reason why we care about journals is because it's tied to accreditation and rankings. So, this is why the university at the end of the day cares. So, we have the Higher Learning Commission. That's something that we're actually going through reaccreditation for at the university level right now. That really needs us to have a system for promotion and tenure that is able to focus on scholarly research. So, the best way to be able to calculate scholarly research that is comparable across all disciplines is through journals and books. As you know, at John Chambers, we have AACSB accreditation. This means that we produce more than 20 PhD students a year. We and this is a business school specific one. We raise more than 25 million a year, I think, is the cutoff, and what's the other one? Anyways, our level of scholarly publications on average are above a certain threshold, which means that we are producing high impact research. So lower tier journals would actually move us out of that accreditation, which is why they don't want to see you publishing in those journals. If you don't end up in an R1 school, you may have ACBSP accreditation. This just means that they focus a little bit more on teaching and you don't have to have as high impact of journals. The European equivalent to AACSB is EQUIS. And then we also got to think about the Carnegie classifications too. So the Carnegie classifications are the R1s, the R2s, the R3, the doctoral, I don't even remember what it's called, but your non-doctoral granting institutions, and then your associate's degree granting institutions. We're the only R1 school in the state. R1 schools are typically the ones that have the most competitive research, but R2s and R3s also have tons of research associated with them too, and are publishing at that very high impact level. So most of these accreditations require some sort of guide to be available for judging scholarly activity. So every school of AACSB accreditation, especially these business schools, they require sort of a journal list. There'll be some sort of metrics for the accreditors to come in and say what level of scholarly impact people are having. So I've seen junior faculty make a lot of mistakes, and grad students make a lot of mistakes, but there's more leeway for graduate students. But these are things I've watched junior faculty do that have been really hurtful to their pathway, and I want to make sure that doesn't happen to you all once you leave here. So one of the worst things I've seen is sort of having an unbalanced publishing habit. So I've seen a lot of people who have been turned down at mid-tenure, which is where you get a review in your third year where they see if you're making good progress. And if you're not making good progress, they will often recommend that you either look elsewhere or they'll only give you a 1-year contract and then tell you that you need to move elsewhere. Some people haven't had publications because they have a very top 5 or bust mentality. This thinking of, I'm getting an AER or an econometrica or a QJE and nothing else is acceptable but that to me. And really sticking onto that top 5, I might get one hit every few years. That's really tough to do when the tenure clock is, they say 6 years, but that last year you're under review. So it's really a 5-year clock. The other extreme is the idea of sort of focusing on the quantity, but not the quality. These are the people you see leaving grad school with 10, 11, 12 publications, but they're all in junk journals that don't actually count. Or they're all in low-ranked journals that send bad signals to hiring committees. So having one of these two extremes can be very dangerous for junior faculty, and both can end up making it so they don't get tenure at the end of the day. Some of the best work I've seen is more of a balanced approach to it. So having your few best papers that you're really trying to get to those top 5s or to the best of your field, while also having others that you're willing to have as more like A or B level publications as well. Another mistake I tend to see is people who will either only work with co-authors, so they never publish anything solo, or they only publish solo and are just refusing to work with other people. Both of these can end up causing issues when you're going up for tenure and promotion because it shows how you work with others within that department. Also, waiting for the paper to be perfect. Perfect papers do not exist. And if they do, they are still sitting on somebody's computer and have never been submitted to a journal because they're still trying to make it perfect. The last 10% of your paper is really going to be up to the reviewers and whatever they want you to do. So my idea is if it's 90% perfect, that's the time to just go. Don't always wait around for that last 10% to be super, super, super right. Other mistakes, submitting to journals that they don't cite. So one of the fastest ways to know if your article is going to be a good fit for a journal is to flip over to your own references section. If you do not cite that journal, that is not the right journal for you, or you need to work in citations from that journal if you do believe that that is the right journal for you. That's one of the first things editors do is flip to the back to see, is this going to be relevant? Another mistake I've seen junior faculty make is refusing to review papers. Reviewing doesn't pay, and honestly, it's kind of a scam, but it's a scam that we all participate in. That's the way that peer review works, is you want to be able to publish papers, but part of that is also reviewing the papers of others, especially if this is for journals that you want to publish in. I understand if it's a scam journal or if it's a low-ranked journal that you may refuse to review a paper there because it's somewhere that you could never imagine yourself publishing. But if the Journal of Health Economics asks you to review, you review. I've seen too many junior faculty that have just refused to review papers at journals that they want to publish in and then wonder why the editor never lets them pass the desk. Other mistakes are not consulting what journals will actually count for them. So, this is where we're going to start talking about journalists and both the idea of how do you get tenure in the institution that you're at, but also how do you keep tenure in the profession. That's sort of a phrase that goes around the econ sphere. And what it really means is that you have a competitive CV that makes you movable to other places so that you're not stuck in one location. And thinking about not only having tenure in your institution, but tenure in the larger profession is a really great way of thinking about, are you making the right choices when it comes to journal publications? Another huge mistake I've seen is submitting to junk journals. So I I probably get 30 of these emails a day just because I publish a lot. But for grad students, I notice that sometimes they'll fall for sort of these fake journal emails. It's because they'll seem really legit. The Journal of Pharmacy will email you and say, "Hey, please submit to us. $100 to for a submission fee, and we will work through the process in so many weeks." The best journals are never going to email you asking for submissions. If they do, it's going to be for very specifically a special issue that you have been recommended for. Don't fall for fake journal emails, especially because a lot of these times these will seem like journals you know or journals you've heard of, but like one letter will be wrong. Or instead of "and," they'll use an ampersand. Don't fall for fake journals, MDPI journals. So this is a basically clearinghouse of one of the companies that produce journals. And almost all of theirs are junk. They're known for very predatory practices, so publishing there can sometimes be a mistake. Um, because they are, while many of these journals have been well ranked or people have published in them in the past, they're now being put on many predatory journal lists, which make them automatically unable to be counted in most schools. Pay to play journals. These are the journals who are like, hey, $1,500, and you go through the review process. Uh, Having submission fees is very normal. In economics, they tended to be between $100 and $300. For finance, they can be upwards of $500 or $600. But the article publishing charges well above 1 or 2,000. Those are typically pay-to-play journals where if you pay it, they print it. Those are not something that you want to do. Or very low ranked in network journals. So once upon a time, there was the American Journal of Entrepreneurship, and lots of people in our network published here. But it was never ranked. It was never in ABDC. It was never in AJG. It was only in Cabell's. Cabell's is basically the one that says, like, hey, is this a whitelisted journal or a blacklisted journal? So identifying junk journals. It was just very low ranked in a lot of different places. So though many of the people in our network were having conversations in this journal, and were writing really interesting and cool papers, they weren't able to get credit for it as they were moving forward. So thinking about, is this, even if it's an in-network journal where a lot of your friends are publishing, does it count for you? So you've probably heard me say journalist a couple times, and you're like, what on earth is a journalist? Every single school, but especially business schools, they either typically have a custom journal list that they use or some sort of public list. So, what this means is just it makes it a little bit easier for people to be able to look up what papers you have published, where you're publishing them, and they can judge the quality of this. So, let me give you a couple examples. First off, let me show you the John Chambers one. You know, this we passed in 2023. It's a way for us to think about for our annual merit evaluation process, what do things look like? And you'll see it kind of differs by department. So, for all of our AI journals, we have it ranked into A plus or A star, whichever one you want to call it. A journals, B journals, and you'll notice that that's the same for everyone. Accounting, A star, A, B journals. Um, Business communications. If we come down to economics, there we go. The economics department is one of the only ones in the school that did not choose to have a custom list. That's very normal for economics departments because we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of journals, while places like hospitality and tourism have 20 in total for the entire field. So we choose to use the AJG. I don't particularly like it, but I'll show you what both of them look like. I prefer ABDC, which many of the other ones here use, like ABDC. It's used by finance or anything else. Now, one piece that is true for our school and that you'll see for many different business schools is that if something doesn't count for econ, maybe it's not on the econ list, but it's, for example, on the finance list or the general business list or the marketing list, then it can still count for you. So you need to ask at whatever school you're thinking about going to, do comparable departments or other departments within your school. If you publish on their journal list, does that count? That's one really important question when we start to go into it. Now, journalists can either be these lists of, hey, these are the A stars, these are the absolute tippy top ones, these are the ones where you're thinking AAR, Econometrica, most of the AEJs. These are the really high-end ones. A's are going to be the ones that are very highly respected. So these typically are your top field journals or the second top field journal. These will be other things that are considered good journals, but may not be considered the absolute top of their field. One really good example of this is, for example, contemporary economic policy, which I am, one of the, what is it called, associate editors at. It's a great journal. It's a wonderful journal. It has wonderful conversations in it, but it's not AAR, and that's sort of what the differences here are. And then anything below that typically doesn't get counted. So what do these journal lists look like? Well, for you to have just a basic understanding of what journalists are, I would normally start with the Australian Business Deans Council. So you can look up ABDC. It is not Australian Best Dance Crew or whatever the first listing is. It's typically the second one, which is the Business Deans Council, where they'll have this journal search tool. And here you can search anything else, like Journal of Health Economics. It'll think through, and it'll give you information about all the ones that have this and what they're rated. So, like the Journal of Health Economics is rated an A star, so that's an equivalent to an A plus. The American Journal of Health Economics is an A, so on and so forth. Some of these might be ranked lower than that. You can also download the sheet that has all of these journal rankings. So if you don't know what your school uses or you're on the market and you're not quite sure yet, the best place for you to be able to start is just by downloading this list and making sure whenever you pick a journal. So let's say I wanted to publish in Journal of Health Economics. This one's just on my head because I publish here a lot. Let's see. There we go. We see that this is rated an A star. I would look up what journals you're considering in one of these, because whether it's for your current employer or your future employer, knowing how others visualize this journal and if it's respected in your field should be a great place to start. When you have a list of journals that you're considering, so you've gone to your reference section and you said, hey, I cite a lot from these 4 or 5 journals. I think these are really interesting. I would be happy to publish in these, and I think that I can contribute to the conversation. One of the first things that you should do is look up the rankings of each to sort of put into order where you want to start and where you want to go. All right. So, like I said, many schools, especially business schools, they either have a custom list or they use something called the ABDC. Oh, forgot about the other one. Or the AJG, which is also called the ABS, depending on who you're talking to, which can be downloaded here. It basically looks the exact same. It's just a giant spreadsheet, so being able to know about that is very helpful to you. So at least you can judge what the criteria is or what sort of journal quality you're looking at. If you end up seeing anything that is ranked as C, at most schools that won't count. Sometimes it'll count if you're in one of the lower ranked schools or if you're at a liberal arts college. If you see anything ranked D, I don't know any schools that end up counting those. So just be careful. One of the third journalists is just Cabell's. So this one is used by typically lower ranked schools or schools where they just don't have a large amount of people within their business school. And like I said, this is just a designation for whitelisted or blacklisted. Basically, if your journal is not on the predatory journal list, that school will count it. So knowing when you're applying to places or when you eventually get offered a job, knowing which one of these is sort of their standard is very important for thinking about this. But remember, we're also considering tenure in the profession, not just what's going to get you tenure in 6 years, but what's going to get you sort of identified as a quality person that could be poached, that could move to different places. And that's going to be by publishing in things that are well respected by your peers. So it's totally normal to ask questions when you are on a flyout, when you're being offered a job. You can ask for their P&T documents. Most business schools that are accredited have to have P&T documents that show you exactly how you're going to get tenure. It'll say that there needs to be so many papers of a certain quality, or it'll allude to how many papers of a certain quality. Some schools just say you need 6 papers with at least 4 of them being A or above, or some sort of general piece like this. One way to be able to gauge if they don't tell you right off the bat or they don't provide you the P&T decisions is to look at who recently got tenure and then sort of counting how many of each level journal that they have. This will sort of give you a standard of where to aim for because that's someone who had recently passed this threshold. Um, so knowing which lists they use is also important for where you publish. For example, JAMA is probably the highest ranked health journal ever. It's the Journal of the American Medical Association. It is read by hundreds of thousands of people every single month. But weirdly, in a lot of business schools, even though it has 20 times the impact factor of AER, it won't count in some departments because it's considered health, not health econ. It's not considered an economics-based journal. So knowing, will your school accept this? Do they have a pathway to accept it? For example, JAMA isn't on our journal list, but I can have a practitioner or an editor at JAMA, if I were to get one, write a letter saying like what the impact factor of the journal is for it to be counted at one level less than what it would be in the a straight health department. Each school has different rules, so this can affect lots of different things of where you're publishing. Like, for example, does world development count as a public economist? Does social sciences quarterly count? Again, this is one that has 20 times the impact factor of most of our journals, but it's going to count more if you're in a social science school rather than in a business school. What about things like entrepreneurship theory and practice? Many of our economics professors have published here, but because it's technically an entrepreneurship or management journal, not all schools count it for economists. So know what the rules that you're playing with are first, and know, does it need to be ranked in economics? Does it need to be ranked in business? Does it just need to be along a certain similar journal list? Or can you use things from other disciplines as well? And at the end of the day, if a journal feels like this, if it feels like a sketchy situation, it probably is, and don't submit to it. So what steps should you take when picking a journal? So there's a series of questions that I like to ask myself when picking any journal. So, for example, who do you reference? The first step you should do is to flip to your own citations and see who you're citing the most, especially who you're citing the most that is published on this topic within the past 2 years. So, journals, part of their impact factor ranking is based upon how many citations they get off papers that have been published in the last 2 years. So if they're considering something new that cites many things from the past 2 years, that's going to look a lot better to an editor than something that doesn't cite them at all or only cites work from 20 or 30 years ago. They may not be publishing on that topic anymore. Some things come into fads, some things don't. So first off, look at your references. And if there's a journal that you have your heart set on, make sure that you reference it. The second is to think and ask yourself, does this count for your school? So checking the list. Thinking about would this be something that is going to be respected or understood once your packet is no longer just being judged by economists, but it goes up to the college level and the marketing committee's looking at it, or the management department's looking at it, or once it gets to the dean or provost level, who their main job is to count different rankings. So check those lists to make sure it will count for you. If it does not count for you, don't spend your time publishing there until after tenure, when you have a little bit more leeway to be able to do these things. A really great place to start is just ask your colleagues. I don't know why it seems like a lot of junior faculty is afraid to do this, but especially your senior colleagues, they're going to be the ones sitting down with your packet at the end of your 5 to 6 years and figuring out if you can be in the department forever or not. So knowing how they feel about a journal really matters. For example, I was in a department once where one of like the economics and finance journals, one of our senior colleagues absolutely hated. They just thought it was a garbage journal, that it shouldn't have actually been ranked an A. And that's something to think about, because if it's one that your senior colleagues would not publish in themselves, or it's one that they would not judge at the quality level that it is in the rankings, that's something to think about. So always just talk to your senior colleagues if you don't know where the perfect home is. You also need to think about, is this recognized by the profession at large? It might be on your individual schools list, but your individual schools list might just be the Cabels, right? You're wanting to check standard lists that really represent what the profession at large is thinking about your packet. So just going to ABDC, pull it up on your phone, quickly put in whatever journal you want there just to make sure that it is ranked, and make sure that it's ranked B or above. because typically below a B is not going to get recognized in many schools. And that's just a good sort of starting place when thinking about these. You also want to think about what order to submit to your journals. So when you're submitting a paper, most of the time you're not going to get into the first journal. If you're always getting into the first journal, you're not aiming high enough. So what you're going to do is you're going to think about what would be maybe the first 4 journals that you think are a great fit for this paper. One of the first things that you're going to do is sort of rank those journals from highest to lowest and just start at the top and work your way down. But there might be other things that you need to consider. For example, the timing and speed of the journal. If you're 2 years out from tenure, the average time it takes for a paper to get through the Journal of Health Economics is 3 years. That may not be the thing to do. You might instead want to go to Health Economics, the second best health journal, because they tend to be able to make decisions within 6 to 8 months. That's a much faster timeline, especially when you're thinking about when you need something for this year, when you need something by your mid-tenure review, when you need something by your tenure review, thinking about special issues. So this is something that we do up in the knee center a lot, where because we study a lot of very specific topics, we'll work with a journal to be able to solicit papers on this topic to come up with a collection of really interesting insights on one specific thing. If there's a special issue that is on your topic, sometimes that would prioritize that journal because you know it's something that's already interested in what you're doing. Do know that most special issues, a lot of the time, they know what papers are going into it beforehand because it'll be tied to a conference, it'll be tied to a workshop. So just make sure you know the details of like that special issue before you do it, or if there's a relevant editor. There's a woman named Mita who's at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse who just got off economic modeling. She was the editor there for a while. While there, it would be absolutely wonderful for people to submit international public finance papers because it was something that she was extremely interested in and loved to publish. Now that she has left the panel, those papers aren't going to move as well or as quickly through economic modeling. Siri Turgeston and Daniel Bennett are both at SBEJ, so the Small Business Economics Journal. This is a really great ranked journal, but both of them really care about sort of like an entrepreneurship approach that's based upon qualitative surveys, thinking about interviews instead of just concrete econometrics techniques. They have to have a balance of both. So that's one of the things that you need to think about is, if I also have qualitative data that I could add in relationship with this, it might be a good fit there because it has relevant editors who are very interested in this topic. So these are things that you need to think about when you yourself are choosing a journal. All right, just some bonus notes. If your paper is accepted at every journal you submit to, you're not aiming high enough. If you are getting a 100% acceptance rate, you have made a mistake. Please relook at your list and jump up the next level. If you are rejected every single time and you have never made it past the desk, you might be aiming too high. You need to start thinking about what would be a better fit for that paper, or how do you change the quality of that paper to match the journals that you're interested in. Many times you're going to be rejected. A lot of times you'll be rejected with reviews. So about half of papers will get past the desk and half of those will continue on and go under multiple rounds of revision. If you're rejected with notes, especially from a field journal, so if you're in health or if you're in public or if you're in something that is a field journal, not a general interest journal like AER or Contemporary Economic Policy, you have non-zero chance of getting the same reviewers. For example, I do a lot of licensing research. There's only 20 of us that do licensing research. I know exactly who the reviewer is every time. So if I do get rejected, when looking at the long list of changes that they want, I want to make sure that I always do the easy changes. You don't want to overhaul the paper. You don't want to start from scratch, especially based off of the words of somebody who rejected you, because it may be bad advice. But doing the easy changes make it a lot better for when those same reviewers may get your paper from a different journal. And they can say, okay, well, they did listen to some of the advice that I gave them. It at least gives you a good starting point. So think about, if rejected, doing the easy changes. Know that the letter to the editor can explain unique fit situations. So editors are in 2 camps on this. Some editors hate letters to the editors. Like, they're not going to read them. They do not care. They immediately delete them. But this is one of those things, kind of like teaching statements. The people who care about teaching statements really care about teaching statements. The people who care about letters to the editors really care about letters to the editors. Now, letters to the editors, they tend to be pretty simple. So here's sort of an example of that. You put a date, you talk to, or you mention what journal you're at. Sometimes you can mention a particular editor or whoever the main editor is who you know is going to be looking at the submission. And typically you want it to be half a page or less. And these are the things that you have to have. First, you say, like, hey, aligned with your journal's goal of look at whatever their goals are on their website, because every single one of them have to have it listed. For example, Journal of Health Economics, they do policy interventions. We submit for consideration whatever your manuscript is. And then you can talk about like why it may be important for that journal. For example, in this one, we thought it was going to be of great interest because it was a very topical issue related to physician supply, which was something they were publishing on at the time. Uh, Sometimes people like to add a paragraph after that, and just know, don't repeat your abstract. They're going to read your abstract. Sometimes, if you're going to use this paragraph, use it to say why yours is special or yours is important. So, for example, we said, instead of talking about our results and everything else, that we have two really important data improvements. We contacted the IMLC convention or commission and got a brand new set of dates that no one had used before that actually invalidates a lot of papers, but now gives the correct dates for people to use. We were able to use a very specific way of filtering physicians through Physician Compare, and that we would be happy to give any replication or data files. This is something that like makes our paper uniquely interesting for this journal, and that's why we added this here, but most of the time you don't even need this paragraph. But what you do need is this little piece at the bottom that basically says, thank you. You know, first and foremost, they're taking their time to be able to look at your submission. And that, it's a lot of work that people don't necessarily get paid for. So being able to say thank you is just one really important piece. But you do want to mention that the manuscript has not been published and that it's not under consideration for publication elsewhere. So this is where economics differs from several fields. So, for example, in law, they have one portal that every single one of their journals use. And they'll put a paper into it, and it can be reviewed by 20, 30 journals at the same time, where they might get offers from multiple journals and then pick whichever one's the highest. We do not do that. In economics, we only have papers that are under consideration at one place at a time. You also want to mention if it violates any existing copyrights. Most of the time it does not. Make sure to have that. If you have any conflicts of interest, this might be where also to include them. We look forward to your decision. Authors' names. Short, sweet, to the point. Do not make it multiple pages. Let's see. Now, this is a sneaky little game that people tend to play with their papers. When selecting reviewers for your paper, this is how the editor does it. First, they're going to go to your reference section, and most of the time, they'll pick people who have published either in their journal or similarly ranked journals on related topics. So they'll, a lot of the time, use your reference list to figure out who your potential reviewers will be. Now, then they will look at your acknowledgments, and if you say, like, hey, we thank such and such for the advice, or we thank such and such for their comments, that might pull people off that potential reviewer list. If there's someone in your field who's particularly cruel, maybe get their comments before submitting. But that's what a lot of people do, is they think about how to frame their acknowledgments in a way that might be able to pull certain people off the reviewer list. But if you put into your letter to the editor, some people should not be asked to review. About half the time that works. And the other half the time, the editor is going to say, I wonder why they don't want that person reviewing, and they'll ask them to review anyways. Now, if they take that recommendation seriously, or if they're going to provide you those comments, that depends on the editor. But about half the time you'll still get there. So be careful when you're requesting people to not review your stuff. Another bonus note is that letter size publications are growing in popularity. All right, so if you're not sure what a letter size publication is, let's see. Here is a really great resource someone put together years ago of just all the short letters places. So AER Insights this is like for papers that are good enough to be in AER, but they're a shorter piece of it. It's only 6,000 words or less. Economics letters are applied economics letters. These are ones that are 2,000 words or less. Health economics has health economics letters. This is also 2,000 words or less. I have a health economics letters. It's great. You want to know why it's great? Because it's less than 2,000 words, and it still counts at the same rank as health economics because it's part of that journal. So thinking through if these short research notes will work for you, or if your paper is saying something brief that you don't need 40 pages to explain, maybe consider that. Letter size publications, they're really growing. People are very much enjoying them. The Journal of Urban now has letter size. The Journal of Health, or excuse me, Health Economics has one. AER Insights has one. The AJ policies have one. Um, then when working with colleagues, so you want to be a good steward of the profession, right? You not only want to be able to do high quality impact research on your own, you also want to be able to do it with other people. One thing I do like to caution junior faculty about is to not let your only co-authors basically be full professors. The reason for this is they don't have the same timeline as you. They go up for review every few years, and they don't have this, I need to get X number of papers done in 5 years or I lose my job, that you do. So think about also working with people who may have just had that pressure, so new associate professors or other junior faculty members. And of course, still work with your full professor and senior colleagues. They're great people, but don't let full professors be your only type of co-author because their timeline just differs enough that it's really slowed down people's work. I recently saw a woman who she got denied tenure. And it's not because she didn't have great research. It's because she had great research with her doctoral advisor, who was a very senior person, and decided that he hated the paper that they had worked on for 4 or 5 years and wanted to completely restart it. Um, well, notice I said 4 years. She had to have that paper under review to be able to get to tenure in time, but he had refused because he didn't feel that it was at the right stage. That might be very, very different depending on who you are. So think through this. And then I always like to recommend looking at the CVs of people who recently received tenure. That's a great place to be able to start to understand what sort of the gauge is within the school that you're at. But also think about the schools that you want to go to. If there's someone who's like your hashtag goals, someone whose career that you really have enjoyed watching or you think they're doing great stuff, looking at their CV and what sort of places that they publish in might be a great place for you to be able to start. But at the end of the day, when in doubt, ask a colleague. Um, they are the ones who are going to be reviewing your packets anyway. They're going to be the ones who can help you the most of advice. It's totally okay to go to your advisor or to just any professor and say, hey, do you think that this is a good journal? Or would you mind reading through this paper or skimming it real fast and tell me if you feel like it'd be a good fit for here? My door's always open. Feel free to come ask me at any time. I will skim through a paper and tell you if a journal is a good or bad placement for it. So when in doubt, ask a colleague. And with that, that's about all I have for you today. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of what's behind the curtain when it comes to journal publishing. If you have any questions, please reach out. I am more than happy to talk about this topic all day and give you any advice or give you suggested placements as you're working through this journey on your own. All right. Well, everybody have a great one. And see you soon. Bye.